Welcome. I'm Bernice Ross, the CEO and President of Brokerage Up and RealEstateCoach.com. I'm very happy to welcome Zachary Beach. He's the COO of SmartRealEstateCoach.com. Again, that's SmartRealEstateCoach.com. And one of the reasons I was really eager to talk to Zachary is that he is an expert on rent to own, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And this is an entirely new business. Well, it's not an entirely new business model. It's been around for many years, but it's a business model right now that's particularly suited to what we're seeing in the marketplace, especially with distressed homeowners. So, Zach, thank you for being with us today.
Bernice, thanks for having me on. I'm excited for our conversation and ready to dive in.
Oh, hey, great. So let's talk about, just kind of give us a general overview of what's taking place in the market right now, just in terms of the lending situation, what you're seeing.
Yeah, as we all know, if you're viewing this, we're in the middle of COVID-19, and the world is pretty much stopped on its access. So what we've actually seen is that a lot of banks are tightening up right now. Most banks now are coming to a point where they're looking for a credit score of at least 700 and 20% down. And the other major thing is that they pulled all jumbo loans basically off the shelf right now. So there's just been a huge opportunity with real estate right now to help out both buyers and sellers during this entire situation, especially people that are in that position where they're looking for a jumbo loan as well. So I was actually walking with my kids and my wife yesterday, and there's a really nice property. It's on the water near my house, and we're in southern Rhode Island. And I was speaking to the homeowner, and they said, yeah, we actually sold the property at full ask, but as of last week, they did their last run, and the buyers end up not being able to qualify. They were literally moving from Hawaii to Rhode Island. And the reason why they weren't able to qualify is because they did that last check and the banks raised their standards. And now they're looking for 20% down. It was a $675,000 house. They wanted 20% down, and the credit score had to at least be 700. Now, I know you're probably saying that not all banks are doing that exact thing, but what we're seeing right now, and Bernice, you can tell me what you're thinking, but what we're seeing right now is there's a tightening of the market right now, especially for banks. So when we dive into the rent-to-own program and buying property, with creative financing, there is a need right now, a void right now, which real estate investors are going to have to fill in order to support the real estate market.
Well, this is one of the reasons I was particularly eager to talk to you about this. Before we kind of do a deeper dive into that, what's kind of the mindset now with the investors? I know so many of them will sit there and they'll kind of rub their hands, and the people I know that've made the most money in real estate are contrarians. They buy when other people sell, and they sell when other people buy. And so this is the time where there are a lot of people buying because of the pandemic, but also we're going to be coming into, even as they start to ease that, it's not going to be business as usual for a while yet. So what are you seeing in terms of the investor mindset at this moment?
Yeah, we've actually seen a flood of investors actually either switching niches. So just to give you an example, we buy primarily in creative financing. So that allows us to sell through rent to own. So we've actually seen a large amount of wholesalers or fix and flip investors now moving into the creative financing niche because of the void that's happening, because buyers that originally could qualify now need such a rent-to-own program in order to qualify for, or in order to buy a house. And that way, in the future, they can qualify for a loan. And also, we're seeing this huge void for sellers that were originally able to sell to these buyers, now cannot. So now they're looking for alternative methods in order to sell their property. Because the truth is, right now, through our types of programs, their sellers are able to net a heck of a lot more money than they would traditionally, even before. So now, before the flood of the market happens, meaning right now, if a seller were to sell with us, before all the competition comes back out of the woodwork, they're actually going to be able to make a heck of a lot more money. So you've seen, what we've seen is just a large amount of real estate investors now diving into the creative financing. And then also what we've seen is people that are, say, green in real estate or always had the dream of being involved in real estate are now seeing that be a huge opportunity to get involved in real estate. For what you were saying, a lot of people end up making their money when the market is down, but also there's not much stability going on with traditional business. So for those who have a full-time job, and what we've seen is a huge unemployment spike. So now they're saying if they have a load of cash that they saved, they're saying, hey, I should now get involved in real estate. That way, next time, if this ever will happen again, they're going to be in the driver's seat and control their own destiny. So you get that huge wave of now people becoming self-employed.
Well, and again, the great thing when you're self-employed is that you can't be fired. But the bad thing about being self-employed, you're the only, you have to rely on yourself for income. So Zach, before we do a deep dive into rent to own, can you describe what you do in terms of a lease option if you're just doing a straight lease option?
Yeah, lease option. So if I'm going to buy from a seller, super simple. It just means that I'm going to agree upon a purchase price with a seller. I guess in a typical lease option, you'd put up a option deposit. We typically put zero money down. That's our motto. We buy without using our own cash, credit, or investors. But then at the end of a lease option, you just have to buy out the seller before the end of that option.
So, and typically in the ones that I've done, there are actually 3 different contracts involved. You have to have the purchase contract. So you do the purchase contract at the time that you enter into the lease option agreement. You have to have the lease option itself has to be drawn by an attorney in almost every state. And then you have a lease agreement. So if you get a deadbeat person in there, you still have that right to evict them, which you may not have in other situations. And because there's been a specific amount of option money, exchanged, then, that's clean. You can go ahead and do the eviction process if you need to. In the model that you're talking about, where you have for rent by own, they've got an interest in that property. So if there's an issue with non-payments, that's a thing, one of the things we want to talk about. But Zach, so let's do a deep dive now into rent to own. And how is this different from flipping and wholesaling? So just, real briefly give us a quick look at those 2 models. And I guess you're not seeing a whole lot of flippers right now. So tell us the differences.
Yeah, so we primarily work in the lease option, owner financing, and rent to own space. Rent to own is our exit model. Wholesaling just simply means that you're going to get the property at a very discounted rate and then sell it to somebody and make a wholesale fee. Those tend to be minimal, so that's why we're not involved there. And then fixing and flipping, the market is so saturated right now, at least from my opinion. Luckily, thank you HGTV, and that's why we're not involved in that area. But fixing and flipping, you buy a property at a deeply discounted price, fix it up, and then in hopes that you're going to be able to create a margin when you sell it. That's a lot of work. So that's again why we typically are not in that situation. And then if you're looking at rent to own, so as I was alluding to, we buy a specific way. So then that allows us to sell through rent to own. And the reason why we focus on that is because there's roughly 80% nationally. And again, it's going to be market to market, 8% nationally in the United States, of buyers that cannot qualify for a loan due to a couple different things, but 2 things specifically: credit. They need credit repair or credit enhancement, and they need seasoning. So someone who's self-employed, they need roughly 24 months of seasoning to show to a bank of how much they're making, produce bank stubs, and then they're going to be able to qualify for a loan.
So when you say seasoning, this is something, explain that term because many people may not be familiar with it.
Yeah, so seasoning simply means that that particular buyer is going to need to show how much money that they're making as being a self-employed person for a period of time. That way they can then qualify for that loan. Because if you're employed, the bank is going to see exactly how much money you make on a week-to-week basis or a month-to-month basis. When you're self-employed, there's many different ways that you and your accountant can show how much money you actually make. So from self-employed people, they tend to show little as money as possible when they're not looking to buy. But then once you're going to buy a property, now you have to show that you're making a lot more money.
So, that's a great distinction, and thank you for explaining that. So now let's do a deeper dive into, what this process looks like. So first of all, how do you go about locating the sellers that are willing to do this? It sounds like
Yeah.
you came across one just by walking. I assume you were keeping your social distance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the way we buy properties, we find sellers in all the same pools that everybody else would, other investors or realtors that be looking for their listings. And that is for rent by owners is a great one. So someone that's looking to rent their property, someone who's a for sale by owner, someone who's looking to sell on their own, or a property that has expired or has been canceled or withdrawn from the market. Those sellers tend to be great sellers to work with, as they've already been through the traditional market and now they're looking for alternative options. So that'd be the typical 3 spots that I would look.
Okay. And then how do you go about locating buyers?
Let's see. Buyers are pretty simple to find as well. As I was alluding to earlier, it's about 80% of the market nationally that needs a program in order to buy a property. So it's just the marketing that we do based upon the property that we have that just clearly states that we are offering this property through a rent-to-own program. So if you place an ad on Zillow and you have it for rent, well, you can state that it is also for that, it can be purchased to a rent-to-own program. Or if you have it for sale on another website, you can clearly say that it's for sale through our rent-to-own program.
Now, why wouldn't somebody, if they could sell, because many places in the country have had a inventory shortage, although we're seeing a lot of glut in the very high end market, and I think there's going to be a lot more property sitting on the market if you need 720% down, and that'll probably jump to 30%, my guess, on jumbos. I just
probably, yeah.
Yeah, I see that. I've seen that happen. I'm, just waiting. This is like instant replay for the last 4 downturns. So raise the lending standards. So there may be some sellers who want to do this, but are there any kind of properties that are kind of better suited to the rent to own? I mean, do I want to do this kind of situation on my really beautiful home, or, is this more like something that may need some work and has some other issues?
Fits the whole gamut. I actually purchased almost $1 million property up here in southern New England, over in Massachusetts, literally on the water in the bluffs of southeastern Massachusetts, $940,000 property. So I purchased from there all the way down to a $100,000 house that needed some work. And then nationally, we buy properties in 80 plus different markets. Especially in the DC, Southern California areas, we're buying properties well north of $1 million through these and selling them through these programs. So sellers that we typically work with, and again, it's all based on motivation and the actual problem that somebody's facing. And if you can provide that solution, then you get yourself a deal. So a seller that, let's say, is free and clear, or meaning they have zero mortgage on the property, is a fantastic person, because typically they don't need all of their money right now, because if they did, then they probably would have refied and pulled out their money. So and when I say refi, I mean refinanced their house and pulled out their equity. So that's a great person. So typically when we work with someone like that, we'd be able to offer them, say, full market value on the property, or even a premium, as long as that they're willing to wait a certain period of time in order to get cashed out completely. And another great type of seller is somebody who, again, expired off the market and they just need alternative options. We all know that people expire off the market for many different reasons. But you could talk about like functionality in a house, things along those lines that a typical traditional buyer would, find a problem in. Our buyers would not. So we're interested in buying those. Or somebody that's legitimately needs mortgage relief. Maybe they have a second home and they can't afford to pay 2 mortgages, or right now you're in the middle of COVID right now, and you get people that maybe have lost their jobs. They've tried to do some other things with banks, and eventually, they're just going to get to a point where they're in arrears and they're going to need some help. So that's another buyer that we work with, or seller that we work with as well.
Well, I'm just thinking for the person whose house has gone into arrears, they're behind on their mortgage. This could be a great solution for them because they'll let them pay off their loan, bring it current. The lenders always have most loans have a due on sale provision. I know we're getting into a bit of a sticky wicket here in terms of what you can say and what you can't say about that. I gather that you've worked this out with your attorneys about how to address this and how the title's taken and everything. Does that vary from state to state in your experience? Or is it pretty much similar across the country?
So it's going to probably vary from state to state, even county to county on some of these. But if you're buying, say you're buying on a lease option, the title's not going to transfer. All you have to do is you would catch up the arrears and then begin taking over a full responsibility of the property. And then the protection that you have as an investor is you put a notice of option on the property. That way the seller cannot go sell to their uncle while you have the property under agreement. So you're protected.
That happened in previous downturns.
Yeah, so that's exactly
why you
record that
deed, so you're not recording the deed because the title hasn't transferred, because the lender, as soon as they see a deed on the property, they're going to wait a minute, But if it's just the option that's recorded, you haven't seen that trigger anything from a lender yet. Is that what you kind of observed?
No, you're just clouding the title, and that way, if it ever goes to another closing and the title's going to transfer, that you're going to be notified. So it just protects you. That way, again, our joke is that the seller doesn't go sell to their uncle while you have a tenant buyer in the house that's working towards owning it, and that way you're fully protected and your assets protected.
Yeah, and I think that's a really huge distinction. So, and you're speaking now from someone who was working in this area where you're actually putting these deals together, and then you're taking a fee for doing that, I assume. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so what we do is, it's not necessarily a fee, but what we do is we'll agree upon a purchase price with a seller, and we'll sell it for a higher price to our buyer, because our buyers need a rent-to-own program, so they're willing to pay a premium on the house. So that's one way we get paid. The second way is there's obviously going to be debt on the property, a monthly payment if there's a mortgage. So we're going to be making that payment directly, but we're going to be collecting a higher monthly payment from our buyers. So that's what we call our payday 2 or our spread. And then we're able to get back-end profit because we're benefiting from principal paid out. So when the house actually cashes out.
And again, for anyone who's listening to this, this is not for someone who's inexperienced. You need to have very specific tools, systems, and legal protections in place to do this. But, if you can talk to your broker owner or to the attorney for your company, if you're a broker, about how this might work inside of your company, I mean, this is just, kind of huge takeaways. Any kind of caveats or things that people need to watch for when we're doing this? We've talked about some of them. Any kinds of red flags about don't work with this particular type of client, or what makes you what keeps you up at night? What keeps you up at night about your model?
To be honest with you, not much, because the reason why we focus on this model, you interviewed my father-in-law, Chris, who's been involved in real estate for over 28 years now. I think I'm dating him now, but over 28 years now, was also a broker owner for 18 years as well. And the reason why we crafted up, or we focus on this model, is because of the 2008 downturn where he got hit severely. So the reason why we focus on this niche is because we're protected, because we put little to no money down, and because we have long terms on deals. So that way we can go through multiple cycles of a real estate market without ever, being kind of put out there. So I would say the one thing that keeps me up at night is we're expecting, and we get paid from our buyers to actually perform. So the one time that I've ever had, or the times that we've ever had issues, were because the buyer did not put up a large enough non-refundable deposit that had them vested in the property. because the distinction between a tenant and a tenant buyer is somebody that actually has a down payment. And we don't do this all in-house, meaning we have specialists that actually used to write loans, and they're the ones that do the screening process. They're the ones that determine their mortgage readiness date, which the mortgage readiness date is determined based upon their deposit, FICO scores, and then debt to income ratio, and then projected income over the period of time. So we are constantly using outside experts to help us hone in on these deals. So again, the one thing I would look out for is if you're going to sell through a rental, just make sure you get a large enough deposit that you're comfortable that they're going to perform.
And how much would that be? Typically, at least 5%. Is there a minimum that you'd recommend, 5 or 6%, or more than that?
It's going to depend on the purchase price of the property, but what we typically would see is between 6 and 8% down, meaning upfront. And we actually have them, even though it is just a formal lease signing with the option to buy, we actually have them sign in front of our attorney to make sure that they understand every single nuance associated with the contract. So at the signing, typically between 6 and 8% down, and then structured over the entire lease term, we get them north of 10%.
And then once they're north of 10%, that's at the end of the 24 to 36 months where they've been able, as you said, to get their, work out their credit issues, their seasons with the lender. So then at that point, they can do either an 80-10 and 10 or a 90-10 loan, and they're much more likely to be able to close now. But that, plus they've been living the property and making the payments. When they get ready to do the final purchase, then they go ahead and do a regular loan. Do you find, how have the lenders responded to they've been doing a lease to own program? Is that something that the lenders say, well, they've already been making the payments, well, this looks like a good deal, or how? Do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, it tends to, if the great thing is we're going to be able to show that they've been making payments, say, for 24 months and they've been on time. Plus they have a non-refundable deposit into the property. They've been taking care of it. It's been really easy for our buyers to then go qualify for a loan because they've already been in that process. We've actually seen some lenders, and it's lender to lender, actually can treat it as like a refi because they've already been in the property for so long. So they have some different criteria there. But yeah, what we've seen is as long as they've actually followed the plan and the systems that we set up in place, they've been maintaining or been involved in their credit repair, credit enhancement program, which is part of their agreement, or if they're self-employed, that they're checking in with the experts that we give them, then qualifying for a loan before the end of their term is a no-brainer. And people, that's the reason why we don't have a very high default rate.
What happens if I'm in this situation I'm in this lease to own program and I'm the person who's leasing to own? What happens if I lose my job and I can't make my payments?
Yeah, well, right now we're in COVID, right? So there's a bunch of that happening. Not necessarily with us, but throughout the world. If somebody were to lose their job and they weren't able to continue to make their payments, then it would be treated as if it goes back to tenant law if you look at it from that standpoint, because there's two pieces involved without going too deep. So if they're not making their rent, then that's an eviction process. That's tenant law. If they're not making their deposits, then they would lose their option to purchase the house. Because there's two pieces to the agreement. So with that, without knowing any more information other than somebody lost their job and they can't make their payment, well, then that would be in a point where they would eventually have to move out of the property.
So, and depending on the nature of, what they're not contributing to, it either would be an eviction under the lease agreement or a actual, removal for essentially breach of contract. And of course, this has to be something, again, that's drawn by an attorney. This is why it's so sticky.
No, absolutely. But I mean, with everything that's going on right now, obviously we're in times in which nobody's ever been here before, right? Yes. Nobody's ever been inside a pandemic unless you were back in like 1920s in like the Spanish flu. So we're working with people just like everybody else. If somebody loses their job, then we're working on a way to help people be able to pay something monthly. You know, I know people are collecting unemployment checks right now, so we're actually structuring things that kind of relate to their checks. You know, and we figure it out. As soon as we get out of this wave, then we'll really be able to see, you know, who's going to be successful in the long run. Because a lot of people that lost jobs aren't. It's not your typical, like they're going to probably qualify for another job or get another job once we get out of this. So as long as we have the ability to help them extend, and they're doing every single thing in their power to continue to work this through, then we're more than okay of extending their agreement to help them get to put them in a position where they can buy their house.
So, final takeaway for today, Zach.
Final takeaway. I would just say, number one, if you're sitting on the fence right now and you're looking to get involved in real estate, I would say there's no better time than to get involved right now, especially with the options that we have and the way we buy property. But just in general, in my opinion, it's the time. And definitely, if you're sitting on the fence and are part of other niches, or you know, part of a real estate brokerage, that you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't look at the type of creative financing that's happening right now, because our community is actually accelerating. We're doing more deals now than we have been the last 2 years. So there's a void that needs to be filled, and we need good, moral, and ethical real estate investors to be able to do that.
I couldn't agree with you more, because that, you know, it's when essentially you're creating win-win situations for the buyers and the sellers. You know, sellers may have had difficulty selling their property, or they were over leveraged and they needed to get a higher price when they could. And then buyers who couldn't get into a property if they weren't using it for rent, rent by own. So Zach, this has been a really great interview. We've been visiting with Zachary Beach. He's the COO of smartrealestatecoach.com. Again, that's smartrealestatecoach.com, and you can reach him there. Zach, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.